When we talk about the M4 Sherman today, people often imagine the endless columns of tanks pushing through Normandy, climbing the hills of Italy, or cutting across France in 1944. It has become such a familiar silhouette, almost inseparable from the image of the American Army in World War II, that many forget what it actually represented. The Sherman wasn't just a tank, it was a reaction. A hurried, improvised, sometimes controversial answer to a world that changed faster than anyone in Washington expected. And the truth is, the Sherman's story begins long before it ever rolled across a battlefield. It begins in confusion, fear, and a race against time. When France collapsed in the summer of 1940, the shock in the United States Army was immediate. Reports from American observers in Europe described a German way of war unlike anything seen before. Armored divisions piercing through forests, bypassing enemy lines, coordinating with aircraft in a way that made traditional defenses useless. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Ryder, one of the officers studying the fall of France, wrote that German tanks weren't exceptional individually, but they were unstoppable when used correctly. And that was exactly the problem for the United States. Because at that moment, America simply did not have a modern tank force. The main medium tank, the M2, was tall, thinly armored, undergunned, and clearly obsolete even before it left the drawing board. General George C. Marshall, the newly appointed Chief of Staff, understood something critical. The U.S. Army was unprepared for mechanized warfare. America suddenly needed a tank, not in theory, not someday, but now. The Ordnance Department scrambled to build something suitable as quickly as possible, but they ran into a technical wall. America didn't yet have the machinery to build a turret large enough to mount a 75mm gun, so they improvised. The result was the M3 Lee, an awkward, almost comical vehicle with a 75mm cannon stuck into the right side of the hull and a 37mm gun perched in a turret above it. Engineers at Rock Island Arsenal later admitted that they didn't design the M3 because they wanted to. They designed it because they didn't have another choice. But for all its flaws, the M3 proved something precious. The United States could mass-produce armored vehicles. It also confirmed what the battlefield demanded. The next tank absolutely needed a fully rotating 75mm turret. And that requirement would shape everything that came next. The creation of the Sherman wasn't the work of a single brilliant engineer. It was the messy product of arguments, negotiations, and competing philosophies inside the U.S. military. Brigadier General Gladian Barnes from the Ordnance Department pushed for advanced designs and wanted to use every new technology available. The armored force, led by figures such as General Jacob Devers, demanded speed, reliability, and a tank that could be delivered in huge numbers. Meanwhile, the ghost of J. Walter Christie, the eccentric engineer whose radical suspension concepts influenced early American tanks, hovered in every design conversation. Christie wasn't directly involved in the Sherman's development, but his ideas about mobility lingered in the minds of the engineers shaping America's armored future. Every detail of the Sherman became a miniature battlefield. Engineers argued over the engine. Should they stick with the Wright R975 radial aircraft engine, or adopt Ford's new GAA V8, which required redesigning the tank's rear hull and internal layout? They debated armor shape, crew positions, the thickness of the glacis plate, the shape of the turret, even the height of the hull. Some wanted thicker armor at the cost of mobility. Others insisted the tank needed to be light enough for easy transport and maintenance. And underneath all of this pressure was an undeniable truth. The United States was not preparing for a single front war. It was preparing for a global conflict, one that demanded not just a good tank, but a tank that could be produced by the tens of thousands. The first Shermans rolled out of factories in 1942, and their arrival in North Africa changed everything. American and British tank crews immediately noticed differences from British Grants and Crusaders. The Sherman felt modern, spacious, almost civilized. The stabilizer allowed it to fire on the move, a feature unmatched at the time. The turret was comfortable and rotated quickly. The visibility was excellent, and crews were given space to escape if the tank was hit. British officers recorded their surprise in field reports. One wrote that the Sherman felt like a tank designed to be fought from, not merely survived in. Rommel's Afrika Korps quickly recognized that the Sherman was something new. In the deserts of Tunisia, Shermans proved reliable, adaptable, and mechanically dependable. Three priceless traits in a theater where dust devoured everything. Allied mechanics praised how quickly they could repair a Sherman. A broken transmission or bogie wheel that might cripple a German panzer for days could be replaced on a Sherman in hours. But the war evolved. In 1943 and 1944, the appearance of the Panther and Tiger tanks changed the battlefield. Sherman crews who once felt confident suddenly faced opponents with thicker armor and far more powerful guns. A Sherman could destroy a Panther from the side, but from the front, the odds were grim. American tankers quickly learned that charging a German heavy tank was not bravery. It was suicide. Veterans left brutally honest accounts of this period. One American tanker wrote that facing a Tiger felt like standing in front of a bank vault armed with a hammer. Another recalled that when a Panther appeared, you didn't pray to hit him, you prayed he wouldn't see you. But this is where the Sherman's deeper purpose emerged. The U.S. Army did not design the Sherman to win isolated tank duels. It designed the Sherman for a type of war where tanks, infantry, artillery, engineers, and aircraft worked together. A single Sherman couldn't outfight a Tiger, but an armored division with artillery on call, air support overhead, and reliable logistics could overwhelm anything Germany put on the battlefield. And importantly, crews developed a relationship with the Sherman that was far more complex than the simple myths suggest. Some loved it. They admired its comforts, its reliability, its mechanical friendliness. They trusted that it would start in the morning and keep moving after days of fighting. Many praised the wet stowage ammunition racks that drastically reduced internal fires. Others hated it. They resented the thin armor, the high profile, and the painful reality that they were often forced into frontal attacks against superior German positions. One British tanker summarized the sentiment perfectly in his diary. "The Sherman will take you through the battle, and if you are unlucky, it will also take you into your grave." It was a realistic human view, free of propaganda, free of legend. By the time the war ended, more than 49,000 Shermans had been built. No tank in history had been produced so consistently, in so many variants, and in such staggering numbers. And ultimately, this was the point. The Sherman was not designed to be the best tank in the world. It was designed to be the tank that could win the war the Allies actually fought. A war of oceans, continents, supply chains, and industrial power. Historians like Richard Honeycutt later wrote that the Sherman's genius wasn't in its firepower or its armor, but in its reliability and its availability. A Sherman could be repaired, shipped, supplied, and replaced faster than any German tank could be built. And in a global conflict fought across distance and logistics, that mattered far more than any single duel between tanks. The Sherman wasn't born perfect. It wasn't born beautiful. It was born out of panic, necessity, and compromise. But it became a machine that carried millions of soldiers forward, a machine that shaped entire campaigns, a machine that symbolized the industrial strength of a nation that hadn't wanted to go to war, but was determined to win once it did. And that is the real story of how the Sherman came to be. Not as a flawless masterpiece of engineering, but as a pragmatic, resilient, brutally honest tool of victory, built not for glory, but for the grim and urgent realities of a world at war.